Hello everyone, welcome to our Building a Game in Love 2D video series. So in this video we're going to continue implementing the basic menu system that we've been building. Our goal here is going to be to make the menu more interactive and essentially allow the player to change the game by adding more objects to the screen. So if I pull up what we did last time, what we had was essentially our game where we have our Yeti in the screen, on the middle of the screen, our trees and our skiers. We added the ability to pause the game by pressing the letter P and essentially open up this menu at the top of the screen where we had created 4 panels with objects and the rest of them empty. So we have our tree, the sign object, the skier object, and then the Yeti object. We also made it so that the player could essentially click in the menu and select one of these panels, and that's why it's highlighted in green. And so we had kind of, the building blocks for the menu done. And what we need to do now is essentially add interactivity with that menu. So what we'll do is give the player the ability to add to the screen under the menu, to essentially where all the trees, the skiers, and the Yetis are right now, the ability to add the object that they've selected from that menu. And what we'll need to do essentially is track what the player selected, and then based on that selection, add that onto the game screen. So without any further ado, let's get into it. So let me pull up the code, and what we're going to start with is by making it so that we can add additional trees to the map. So to do that, there's a couple things that we need to do. Since we want to implement it in a way where the player presses a key on the keyboard, we'll add a new section in our love.keyspressed, and we'll do that with another if statement. We only want to make it so that the players can put more game objects into the game when the game is paused. So we'll do if pause status is true, and we'll also want to use the key, the letter key this time as our key. Then what we want to do to add more trees to the game is insert additional trees in our tree table. So we're just going to copy paste this code and just plop it in here. Now what we do want to do here is bring that to the bottom, and we're going to create a new tree. So I'm going to call it new tree, make that equal to tree input, just like that, and replace everywhere we see the tree table I, because we're trying to modify the new tree object now, and then add the new tree into the tree table. And so if I save this and now run the game, when I press pause and I press the letter T, you can get new trees on the map. So the problem here is that you'll see like a lot of the trees overlap existing trees, and it's also popping these trees at random. So the issue is, if we look at our tree class and we look at our init function, a tree x and y position on the game is set based on a random number between 100 and the width and height of our screen. So what we need to do is we need to parameterize this and pass in an input. So we're just going to call it input x and then input y. So these inputs, what we're going to do is we're actually going to track where the mouse cursor is. And so to do that, we actually want to track the mouse cursor when the game is in pause. So in our love.update, we're going to get to the bottom, and we're essentially going to add an else statement. So essentially when the game is not paused, we're going to track the mouse x and mouse y coordinates. And so that's a function called love.mouse.getPosition. Because we're creating essentially a table here with x and y keys, we need to go to our dependencies table, and we'll add a mouse table here. Quick call out, mouse x and mouse y, these are the variables that we're using to track what menu selection was made, whereas mouse table is tracking where the cursor is on the map outside of the menu. So that's kind of like the distinction between the two. So we'll save that. And then now that we have essentially a mouse X and mouse Y, inside of our love.keepPressed function where we're trying to add these new trees, we can do input X is equal to mouse.x, oops, and then input Y is equal to mouse.y, just like that. The thing that we need to make sure we update is because we've changed our init function for our trees, the trees that are automatically loaded when we first load the game need to have an input X and input Y set as well. So what we're going to do is we're just going to copy these 2 lines of code, bring that into main, add that up here, and then just clean it up by deleting the selfs and then making input X and input Y equal to our math.random functions. Just like that. And so now if we run the game and I press P and I click T, we're summoning the trees on the map where our cursor is. And so this is pretty awesome. Now we can put trees wherever we want. The awesome thing is that these trees, if I unpause the game, have all their own animation and they all run. The Yeti can burn these trees down, so they have the exact same behavior as of our initial trees. And if I summon skiers, you'll see they'll try to avoid those new trees on top of the existing trees. So essentially these new trees they share every single characteristics that the existing trees have, and that's because we're using the same class to create these new trees. So this is how scalable the code is. So now that we've added trees, what we want to do is we want to make sure that we can only add trees if we've selected the tree panel in our menu. So to do that, we're essentially going to modify our if statement and add a bunch of other conditions. So we said earlier that mouse X and mouse Y here are the indicators of what's been selected in the menu. So all we need to do is check whether or not we are in panel 1, 2, 3, or 4 based on the mouse X and mouse Y position. And so in this if statement, we can add some conditions essentially with mouse X is less or equal to and then a number, and then mouse X is greater or equal than a number. And then we can just repeat that over for mouse Y. And so these numbers, so to find these numbers, all we have to do is go to menu and follow the X panel, or essentially this AABB collision piece to figure out what are the delimitations between the first panel, the second panel, third panel, and so on and so forth. And so what you'll see is mouse X to be in panel 1 needs to be greater or equal than X panel plus 5 and less or equal than X panel plus 55. And X panel for the first panel is just self X plus I, the ith panel, times the width divided by 10. The ith panel, so the first panel, is 0, so X panel for the first panel is just self X, which is 10. And so mouse X needs to be greater or equal to 10 plus 5 and less than 10 plus 55. So essentially it needs to be less than 65 and greater than 15. Just like that. And then for the Y, it just needs to be greater or equal to self Y plus 5, which in this case is 10 plus 5, 15, and less or equal to 40. So less than equal to 40 and greater or equal to 15. Just like that. So if I run the game now and I try to enter tree, nothing's going to happen. If I select the Yeti panel and I try to press T, nothing's going to happen. But if I select the tree panel, now we can summon trees. And so essentially what we've done is we've created the ability with this more advanced conditional if statement, the ability to track what panel's been selected. And so if we want to expand our menu interaction to be able to add the sign or the skier or the Yeti, all we need to do is just create a bunch of these if statements or else if statements with the right mouse X and mouse Y delimiters. So with that said, let's add the second panel. So I can just do else if, and since we want everything to be the same, I can just copy the entire conditional statement here. But then I need to go back in here, and for our second panel, essentially I is going to be equal to 1. So X panel is going to be 5 plus essentially 1 times 60, so 10 plus 60, so 70, so it's going to be 75, greater or equal to 75, and less or equal to 1, let me do the math in my head real quick, 130. So I would do less or equal to 130, and then greater or equal to 75, just like that. And then the Y statement essentially stays the same, so we don't need to change it. And so in this case, the second entry in our panel, so we define this inside of dependencies, our panel 2 is the sign. So the sign is interesting because we actually don't have a game object for it just yet. But what we can do is we can use the same object entity build that we've used to create the tree, the Yeti, the skiers for a new game object, the sign. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy the tree script. We're going to rename it to sign, just like that. And then inside of this new sign.lua script, we're going to overwrite every time we see tree with the word sign. We actually don't need the removal because we're not going to make it so that you can remove the signs. So everywhere we see sign, we just overwrite it with sign. Or everywhere we see tree, we replace it with sign. Because we're creating a new object for the sign, we need to go into our tree defs where we define the animation and render values for our objects. And so we're going to copy skiers down, just like that, and we're just going to replace skiers with sign, and then we'll call it idle sign. And so if we go to our dependencies, we can see that our G-frames, or the number of quads we have for our signs, essentially there's 2 quads. If I pull up the sprite sheet and I zoom in, the 2 signs are essentially this green smiley sign and then this KO red sign. So what we're going to do is our sign's going to just iterate across green, red, green, red, green, red, green, red. And that's going to be our animation. So if I go back to tree def, we've got only 2 frames. I'm going to replace that with 2, just like that. And now, essentially what we've got is everything we need to create a sign object. So what we can do is inside of main, we can, let's just copy everything we did for the tree to be entered into the game, but replace wherever we see tree with sign. We can just keep replacing tree with signs, just like that. Boom, 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 boom. We'll need to create a sign table. That's pretty important, so let me actually go do that right now. So if I go to dependencies, in here we're going to create a new table called sign table. That's where we're going to put our signs in. And then we only have idle sign animation. So I need to capitalize the S, just like that. And because we're adding a sign animation, we need to add that in our update or love.update function. We'll iterate through our sign table, and then we'll just run the update function for our sign. And then similarly, we'll do that in our render function. So let's just do that really quick. Sign, sign, sign. So this was actually really easy. We literally just copy pasted code. But what we've done is actually create a whole new game object, our sign. So if I press T, we get an error because I went a little bit too fast and I forgot to bring and source. So every time we create a new script like this, we need to source it into our game, and we do that in dependencies up here. So now that I've added that, and we press P, and now I can put a sign. And so now we have a whole new game object, and that was that easy. So if I press P, you'll see it iterates between green, red, green, red, green, red. It's using our box 2D framework, so collisions with the signs are real. And yeah, they're part of the game. Similarly to our trees, if I add more trees to the game, they're now part of the game. So if I unpause, let me unpause, I can burn these trees, and then the skiers are trying to avoid these new trees, as well as the signs are part of the game. So that's working great. So now that we've added our trees and our sign, let's add some skiers, and that's going to give us the ability to summon the skiers anywhere on the map instead of only at the top or at the far left side of the screen. And then we'll also add the ability to add more Yetis. So for the skiers, we can just go to our main.lua script. Let's go back up to our love.keyPressed, and let's just add another else if statement. Whoop. And all we need to do is figure out the new mouse X, and mouse Y stays the same. So essentially it's just you take the larger value and you add 10. So the mouse X here is going to be 140. And then you take the what is it? You take the larger value at 10, and then you add 55 to that number. So it's at 195. And then we'll do it one more because we've got 4 panels. And so here we add 10, so that's 205. And then we add 55, and so that's 260. Just like that. Perfect. So the first statement here was to add the trees. The second is a sign. The third is to add a skier. So we'll just bring our skier. Let's actually make it easy and just copy paste this part in here. Just like that. And then we'll just call it new skier to keep it consistent. Oops. And since we are bringing in an input and X and Y for the skier, we'll need to go to our skier class here and replace the self X and self Y. So we'll do input.x and then input.y. Because we are parameterizing our init function, we need to make sure that the other parts of where we can add skiers, so essentially we press the space bar, gets those inputs passed. So we'll just copy this, similar to what we did with the trees, and we'll just clean that up real quick. Boom. And so like this, when you press the space bar, the skiers are always summoned on the left side of the screen. But if you summon the skiers from the menu, they get summoned wherever your mouse cursor is. And then for the Yeti, let's just do the Yeti while we're at it. What we need to do, so the Yeti is right now a variable. What we need to do is we need to put the Yeti inside of a table, kind of like how we have our trees, our skiers, and our signs. So inside of dependencies, we'll create a new table. Let's just copy sign table. And then we'll just call it Yeti table, just like that. And then in main.lua, we'll just we'll add a table.insert statement. Oops. Oops. And then we want to insert into Yeti table our Yeti character. But because we've put our Yeti character inside of a table, inside of our love.update, we need to wrap the Yeti, and because there can be now multiple Yetis, we need to wrap our Yeti into our Yeti update function inside of a for loop. So let's just do that right now. And then we'll just clean this up, put Yeti, just like that. And then this is Yeti table. Since we have multiple Yetis to update, we also have multiple Yetis to render. So we'll also update our render function here and call the Yeti render function, just like that. And so if we pull up the game now, we have expected, oh, okay, I have a problem with, oh, I didn't save the table here. All right, let's try that again. Essentially, it failed to insert the Yeti character inside the Yeti table because I forgot to save the dependencies where we created the empty table. So I was trying to insert the Yeti character into a table that didn't exist. So let's run that. If I press P, I select my trees, I can summon a tree, I can summon a sign, I can summon a skier, and, ooh, a sign. Let's see, we went too fast and I forgot to change this part. So for that, I'll just copy the Yeti information. And then let's call it new Yeti. Sorry about that. Boom, boom, perfect. And so third time's the charm. If we select the Yeti, nothing is happening. Why is nothing happening? Did I not? So we have our Yeti table. We create the new Yeti. That gets added to the Yeti table. And then the Yeti table, the Yeti render. Oh, yeah, this should work. Why does it not work? Oh, you know, it does work, but what's happening is I'm summoning the Yeti in the middle of the screen. Because, again, I forgot to update the input or the X and Y values inside of the Yeti init function. Oops. All right. So now we just need to go and make those calls before we create our first Yeti character. So we just need to set input and output, or input X and input Y to window height and width divided by 2. And so now this is moment of truth. So we've got our Yeti in the middle of the screen, and if I press T, we got a second Yeti, and a third Yeti, and a fourth, fifth, sixth, bunch of Yetis. Then everything else, yep, we got our trees, we got our signs, and then we got our skiers. And so if I unpause the game, oh, now we have all of the Yetis moving together in unison. It's kind of cool. It's like a Yeti parade. But essentially, since the Yeti is the player, what we're going to do is we're going to limit, like you can't have more than 2 players at a time. Let's make it 2. So what I can do is inside of this else if, I can make sure that the Yeti table doesn't have more than 2 entries. So I can add another condition, and Yeti table less than 2. Oh, and it needs to be pound Yeti table less than 2. So now, if we summon, we can only summon up to 2 Yetis. And if I unpause, now we've got 2 Yetis. Nice. And so we can put a ton of trees. You know what? We're going to trap this Yeti. It's trapped. Let's put some signs. Let's make the game look crazy. Now let's summon some skiers. A little bit here and there. Unpause it. I'm going to summon more skiers. And then, yeah, our game just got like way more complex. Let's actually remove the box 2D rendering so it looks a little bit more clean. Let's do this one more time. So 2 Yetis. I'm going to put a bunch of trees in here. going to put some signs, and let's summon some skiers, and unpause. And so now we got 2 Yetis running around. We can keep summoning skiers, and we can actually, what we could do is we could make it so that one Yeti is controlled with the arrow keys, and the other Yeti can be controlled with AWSD, and we could have like a multiplayer thing where you're competing to eat the most skiers. So if you eat a skier, you get points, and you're competing against each other. That could be actually a really fun game where you're fighting, or you're I guess dueling with your friends. You can burn down trees and eat skiers, and you're trying to get the most points. Okay, yeah, no, this is awesome. Like, I'm super excited. This is has been a super cool implementation. It's actually really exciting to keep building this more. I feel like as we add more features and new things into the game, I kind of get way more ideas of like what we could do with this game. I kind of started out without really a clear vision for what we were going to build, and I think it's really coming together, and I think we're kind of getting close to having an awesome concept. So yeah, I'm super excited. Maybe I'll try doing a 2-player system in the next video. Maybe that'll be a cool thing to put together. But like always, I really enjoy you watching along, and any feedback you have, any ideas or thoughts or things I could add to the game are super welcome. And hopefully you're finding these very helpful and interesting. So again, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.